Welcome to the SoccerWire podcast, the weekly news show that focuses on the state of youth soccer and player development in the United States. I'm Mark Serber, and today we'll get into this week's top news. Charles Boehm and I will discuss the U-17 men's national team as they kick off their World Cup campaign in Brazil on Sunday. And we have a special guest joining us, none other than former U.S. men's national team player and NBC soccer analyst Kyle Martino will join us to discuss his over-under initiative. This, plus our weekly review of the top youth soccer headlines, latest college recruiting news, and more. The SoccerWire podcast for October 24th, 2019 starts now. We start this week with a visit from SoccerWire managing editor Quinn Castile. Quinn, what stories are you tracking?
Well, Mark, obviously we mainly focus on youth soccer and player development here at SoccerWire. This week, though, I want to give a little attention to the top of the pyramid with some major professional news happening with the MLS Cup playoffs kicking off this past weekend. Couple of really crazy games around the league. Just one I wanted to mention is that DC United lost to Toronto FC in their opening game 5-1 in extra time. The game ended 1-1 after 90 minutes of regulation, and DC United gave up 4 goals in 30 minutes of extra time to lose 5-1. It was a shocking way to go out, and it was also as a result, was the last game in Major League Soccer for the legend Wayne Rooney. So very tough way for him to go out with DC United. Over in the Western Conference, in the MLS opening round, Seattle Sounders beat FC Dallas 4-3 with Jordan Morris, the really solid striker for the U.S. men's national team, scored a hat trick in the 4-3 win for Seattle. After the game, Jordan was told in front of the whole team in the locker room by their coach that he had been named MLS Comeback Player of the Year coming off a torn ACL this season. Morris, by the way, having a great year with the USA, and now Seattle has already booked their spot in the conference final as well, beating Real Salt Lake 2-0 on Wednesday night.
And crazy games in that first round. I can't wait for the second round now because we have another version of El Tráfico, LAFC versus the LA Galaxy. That match tonight is going to be insane. However, we're also getting set to crown a champion in the NWSL.
Yeah, every girls soccer player in the country this weekend should set their calendar to watch the National Women's Soccer League Championship match Sunday afternoon at 3:30 p.m. It's going to be nationally televised on ESPN. It's a great matchup between the North Carolina Courage and the Chicago Red Stars. The game is actually in North Carolina, and it's been scheduled to be played there all season long. The Courage played their way to the game, and now they have a home game for the title match. Just a quick little background on both teams. North Carolina is the 3-time back-to-back-to-back NWSL Shield winner, meaning they've had the best record in the regular season the past 3 years. They won it all last year in the title match over Portland, and they're stacked with Team USA players, all the players that you loved watching in the World Cup, with Crystal Dunn, Abby Dahlkemper, Sam Mewis, Jessica McDonald. They've got Lynn Williams. Matching up against Chicago, the Red Stars, they're really known as a great defensive team. They have USA defenders Casey Short and Julie Ertz, and they have the USA's starting goalkeeper Alyssa Nair. And then on offense, the Red Stars have the superstar Australian Sam Kerr. So a really great matchup. Sunday, 3:30 Eastern Time on ESPN, NWSL Championship.
And just to kind of echo what you said, Quinn, is if you haven't watched an NWSL game yet this season, please tune in. I mean, this year has been amazing from top to bottom, and it's fitting to see the North Carolina Courage, who have really set the standard for the league, getting another opportunity to cement their legacy that they've been building. Quinn, we've got to move on, and we'll go to the youth game where the focus is on the U-17 men's with the World Cup set to get underway in Brazil this weekend. However, Charles Boehm and I will tackle that later on. But the U-15 boys are also overseas as well.
Yes, the U.S. U-15 boys national team is over in Poland this week playing in the UEFA Development Tournament. They're off to a great start. They're in the 3-game event. They've already won their first 2 games against Iceland and Poland. The big story there is that 7 out of the 20 players for the USA represent FC Dallas Academy, which is just incredible that you have more than a third of the roster all representing FC Dallas. It just shows the amazing development that's going on in their academy program.
Well, the tradition of FC Dallas providing youth players for various national teams continues at an alarming rate. I think they're nearing or may have even passed having over 40 players represent various youth national teams from U.S., Mexico, Canada, and I think also like Argentina and a couple other countries as well. So the tremendous work started by now head coach of the MLS side, Lucha Gonzalez, and everyone there continues. What other youth stories can we be looking out for this week?
The first set of speakers for this upcoming United Soccer Coaches Convention has been announced. Just a few of the top names that have already been announced this week are departing U.S. Women's National Team head coach Jill Ellis, Utah Royals FC head coach Laura Harvey, and April Heinrichs, who is the current head of FIFA's technical study group, and she's a 1991 FIFA Women's World Cup champion with the U.S. Women's National Team. Also, in the coaching realm, the ECNL announced the dates and the schedule for their 2020 ECNL Coaching Symposium. That is going to be held January 24th to the 26th in Las Vegas at the Area Resort and Casino. That's the 4th annual symposium for the ECNL, and it's just once again going to feature top coaching and leadership experts from all over the world. Also, new set of high school rankings are out this week, and I just wanted to mention the top teams on the boys' side and the girls' side. They are both still undefeated, and they've both been holding on to those number 1 spots all season long. On the boys' side, St. Benedict's Prep from Newark, New Jersey, still undefeated at 13-0-1. On the girls' side, Eastern High School from Voorhees Township, New Jersey, they are 16-0-0, perfect on the season, and they're both still holding down those top 2 spots representing New Jersey.
That's Quinn Castile, SoccerWire's managing editor. Quinn, great stuff as always. To read those stories and more, be sure to check out SoccerWire.com. We're going to hear a quick word from our sponsor, PlayerMaker, and when we return, Charles Boehm will join me to discuss the U-17 men's national team and what would constitute a successful World Cup. The SoccerWire podcast is brought to you by PlayerMaker, the lightweight device worn by soccer players on each foot to record every touch of the ball and every step. Within minutes of training or games, players and coaches get a report on every touch, including left and right foot usage, possessions, passing, and dozens more. PlayerMaker is the most holistic player performance approach that's never been seen before. Visit SoccerWire.com/PlayerMaker to schedule a demo. Welcome back to the SoccerWire podcast, your one-stop shop for weekly news headlines and in-depth discussion on the biggest issues facing the youth game today. I'm joined now by Charles Boehm, a regular SoccerWire contributor and an editor at MLSsoccer.com. And C-Swizzle, let's get right to it. The U.S. has a tough group with Senegal, the Netherlands, and Japan. What question should we be asking about this U-17 U.S. men's national team as they head into their World Cup campaign?
I'm really intrigued about this U-17 World Cup. In every measurable way, this is the most experienced team that the U.S. has ever sent to a U-17 World Cup. And it's entirely professional, I believe now. Some of these players are in high-level environments in Europe or MLS regulars. I think Gianluca Busio of Sporting KC is the most experienced with over 1,000 MLS minutes to date, and he's in his third season as a pro. He's probably the most, but others are doing it in big clubs, whether it's Gio Reyna at Borussia Dortmund or any number of players overseas, and then MLS homegrowns, MLS USL reserve team players, that sort of thing. It's a really, really tough group. I honestly don't think fans should realistically expect them to advance out of the group. But this is, to me, in a developmental sense, this is the best you can ask for. You've got a relatively battle-tested group of kids. You've got a coach that's shown promise in his early months on the job. Rafa Wicki seems to have put his stamp on the team in a positive way since taking over really not long at all before the CONCACAF qualifying tournament. And now you've got three world-class or close to it opponents with which to measure these players. So they've got at least 3 games, 270-plus minutes in which to show us what they've got and how they compare. So I'm fascinated by it. I think that fans, and it's great also that fans can watch these games relatively easily compared to just a few cycles ago. Watch these games, try and learn what you can about the process of development, the process of growth, and see how they handle these challenges. 3 very different opponents. I think it's going to be 3 very different matches, and let's see how they do.
What you said about this group is this is a group that has a lot of professional experience, that is very well battle-tested, that has a very tough group in Group D, which I think you could, looking at all the other groups, slap the proverbial group of death label on it. Who are some players that, even the ones you just mentioned, you expect to have a breakout tournament, and if they haven't already, put themselves in the shop window for maybe some European clubs?
Well, it's striking. We joke about the hype train all the time, right? And how American players, young ones coming up, especially if they're flashy or exciting on any level, we in the views of some, overrate them, overhype them, elevate expectations unnaturally. But in this case, I think the amount of awareness that people have about these players, considering that they're 15, 16 years old, is striking. And I think it shows that there is a deeper awareness of the youth game, of youth development, of the process that starts, in the early teens that reaches peaks at the national team level, the senior national team level. So, for a lot of our audiences, Gio Reyna, Joe Scally, George Bello, Damian Loss, the goalkeeper who recently joined Fulham from the Fire Academy. These, if not household names, these are certainly familiar names to many in the soccer community. So I'm intrigued by that. I think I'm encouraged by it in the sense that the more awareness and education we have, filtering as deeply as possible through the fan base, the benefits of that will manifest themselves in a bunch of different ways. I'm personally of the opinion that the hype train is part of the process, and we should neither celebrate it nor denigrate it. It's an aspect of pressure and expectation that aspiring professionals and future national teamers have to deal with. And again, you learn a lot about these players that you can't learn anywhere else in a big time tournament environment like this. It's not just that there's TV cameras on and there's a lot of fans watching around the world. These are just a smorgasbord for scouts. There's going to be scouts from all over the world, from the biggest clubs in the world, watching these players. 1 or 2 good games can change your life, can get you a big time contract or move you from a small club to a big club and so forth. So it's exciting, and it's hard to guess who's going to step up in that moment. But the important thing is to get there, qualify, give yourself a chance to seize those moments.
So this is the most professional, the most battle-tested U-17 World Cup squad that we've ever had. With that said, what would be considered a successful run for this group compared to teams of the past? And you said just moments ago, even if they don't get out of the group, there could still be prospects for success. I think we forget that at the U-17 level, success isn't always defined in W's and L's.
It's true. Again, considering that we're all supposed to be sort of adopting and learning about a more cerebral approach tactically and philosophically to play, and specifically the national team, right? Greg Berhalter's squad is supposed to be the top of the pyramid, where players can use techniques and ideas to bring the men's national team up to a higher level than they've been at lately. And this is where it starts in a lot of ways. This is the first meaningful signpost we have for seeing whether the tools to implement that style and the ideas that the coaches are supposed to be passing on should be showing. So I'd like to see proactive play, coherence in the build-up, patterns of play, an ability to get the ball, keep the ball, use the ball, and then and also be successful without it too, to absorb pressure, to keep both sort of mental and collective tactical coherence in pressure-packed situations. Again, I think each of these three opponents will present different challenges to this group, and we'll see how they handle it.
And finally, two interesting subplots to keep an eye on. The first was the hiring of Rafael Wiki to lead this team, and then secondly, as you said off air last night, that the U.S. youth national teams continue to play players out of position in big tournaments. Is it smart management in terms of developing players, or, this being a World Cup, is it a sign of dodgy roster management? You mentioned the case, to me, of Kobe Hernandez-Foster.
Yeah, he's Exhibit A here, and this is a sort of an ongoing topic, I guess, or a recurring topic. When you at this level, should you be playing each individual at their best position in order to showcase their skill set to the maximum and to give them the best opportunity to shine on the big stage, or are you going to try and pick the best 21 or 22 players in the country or in the player pool, and then arrange them in the 11 that you think gives you the best chance to win, best chance to meet your collective goals? Hernandez-Foster is, by many accounts, one of the top prospects in this age group. He's could turn out to be a world-class left back. I mean, I think most of what I've read and the people I've spoken to see his future role at the professional and senior international level as left back. But he's been playing center back for a lot for this team, because that's where I think Wiki likes, and other coaches like, his passing ability. They're maybe a little short on bodies in that space compared to more options in the fullback role. So is that misusing that player? Is that not getting the most of that out of that player, or are you solving team problems with an individual skill set? It's a fun conversation, and I think my concern is that it's a little bit of a recurring pattern with not just U-17, but I've seen it at U-20 level, at U-23 level, multiple different age groups, where it's not clear whether we're getting the most out of a given player, or if the roster has been built with a sense of balance that you would want to have in a big tournament like this.
And why was Rafael Wiki a bit of a surprise to you?
Well, in some ways, the hiring made sense because he's an experienced European coach with a good track record of having sort of climbed the coaching ladder in the UEFA system, and as well a little bit of an MLS experience, brief MLS experience with Chivas USA. But I can tell you that sort of around the grapevine, there's a general sense that the hiring of Wiki was a shot across the bow for American-born coaches. There's a sense that American-born coaches were overlooked, and there was a specific move made to go overseas. If he performs well and continues on the trajectory that he showed in qualifying, I think you could see a little bit of a paradigm shift, maybe where we see more coaches coming in from abroad, and maybe that's good. The one hand, our coaches should have to compete in a global marketplace and in a global system the same way that our players have to at some point or another. The issue, though, is I think there's some coaches and members of the American coaching community that feel like they're being frozen out, that there's it's another example of the federation sort of piling extra BS on top of the standard job itself, the business itself. So, you've got a lot of different stuff swirling around here, whether it's the mandate that full-time federation employees, all coaches going forward are expected to be living full-time in Chicago, the political environment that you inevitably enter into when you are a federation employee, when you're spending a lot of time in Soccer House. Are all these things constructive? Are we really pulling from the full pool of coaching talent, both home and abroad? And right now, especially with today's news that it looks like Tab Ramos is going to leave the U20 job to join the Houston Dynamo, that's yet another coaching vacancy that's opened up. There are more vacancies, it seems like, than there are positions filled in the youth national team setup. I think it's worse on the boys' side than the girls. Don't quote me on that, but in my anecdotal recollection. So that's a real question. What's going on? These used to be the most desirable jobs in youth soccer in America, and now some of them have been vacant for months. What's happening there?
Yeah, that opens up a whole can of worms that we're not going to get into because we want to stay focused
Future
on
episodes.
This U-17 World Cup. But thank you for giving me those ideas for next week. However, I do want to get back to this idea of the U-17s and the idea of winning or playing the right way. The match against the Netherlands really intrigues me because for so long, we've viewed the Netherlands as the standard of youth development. You talk about the Ajax Academy, the way the players who come through that go on to have success not only in Holland, but around the world as well. And so I guess my question to you is, and just sorry, tracking back, is that the other thing is that our federation is littered with Dutch coaches. There's a heavy Dutch influence. So can you see this match against Holland as kind of the litmus test as to where we are in terms of our own player development system?
I can tell you right now, this is the third and final match of the U.S. group stage. We're looking at November 2nd. This is, and you can watch on FS2 or Universo. And
easy. You're killing my outro here.
This is a match that I know it's going to be meme-worthy, especially if things don't go the U.S.'s way, because in the backdrop to all this is Sergiño Dest having to make his decision supposedly any day now, maybe next week. I'm not sure exactly when he's going to announce which national team he's going to pledge his allegiance to. And so if the Netherlands roll in and disassemble the U.S. U-17s, I think there'll be a lot of chatter and to and fro and seething about that. But look, the Netherlands has been one of several nations that over the decades we have either aped or taken inspiration from, depending on your perspective. The coaching education department of the federation is heavily Dutch influence at this time. I think they should be a yardstick for sure for not only the individual players and the collective output, the quality of the performance, but the philosophies, the structure. I mean, one thing that I love about watching Dutch teams, whether it's Ajax exhibit it to a certain extent as a club, but their national teams at most levels, when things are running like they're supposed to, there's a very clear set of roles on the pitch that every player coming up is able to perform at least one, in some cases 2 or 3 of those roles. And the 4-3-3 is this framework for orthodoxy for these players to understand the concept of the game, understand their role within it. And it is maybe it can be a little constricting for some of those players sometimes, but there's this clear tradition and this clear clarity of pathway. And I think we've lacked that to a large extent, even though for a while in the early years of the Development Academy, 4-3-3 was a mandated formation that all Development Academy clubs were told from on high that they had to play. So I think we've tried to copy them over the years, and maybe this game will show a little bit of where that's gotten us.
Well, if you can't beat them, join them, and now we have to beat them. So the U.S. opens group play on Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern against Senegal, faces Japan on October 30th, and closes out the group stage against the Dutch on November 2nd. All matches will air on FS1 or FS2. Believe the first match is on FS1 and the final 2 matches are on FS2. From the world stage, we're going back to where it all starts, on the playgrounds and local parks. That's where former national team player and NBC's Premier League analyst Kyle Martino is doing some pretty cool work, and we'll discuss it with him when we return after a word from our sponsor, Player Maker. The SoccerWire podcast is brought to you by Player Maker, the ultimate performance product for soccer teams and players. Player Maker is already being used by the world's top Premier League clubs, championship college teams, and now available for the youth market on a subscription basis. The Player Maker system records every touch of the ball and every step, providing information for coaches and players such as total touches on the ball, right and left foot touches, possession times, distance covered, sprints, and passing completion, among many others. Player Maker data can help coaches at every level to plan their training sessions effectively. Every player receives feedback on their personal technical and physical training goals. For a demo of Player Maker, visit SoccerWire.com/PlayerMaker. Player Maker, fast track player development. Welcome back to the weekly SoccerWire podcast. We want to thank everyone who listened and commented on last week's show and encourage you to share, like, and subscribe, as well as reaching out to us on email at news@soccerwire.com with news tips, comments, and your own college commitment news. I'm Mark Serber, and the man with the silky smooth voice next to me is Charles Boehm, and we are honored to be joined now by former men's national team player and current NBC soccer analyst Kyle Martino. Kyle, it's great to speak with you.
Yeah, it's great to be on with you guys.
Kyle, you've been doing a lot of amazing work bringing soccer to areas where you feel that kids are being neglected by the system with Street Soccer USA and Street Soccer FC. But I want to hear about the Over-Under initiative.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for giving me that opportunity. You know, a lot of the amazing work being done in the space has been done for a long time by incredible people that. With Street Soccer USA, two brothers, Lawrence and Rob Can, who had the really scary and unfortunate life tragedy of losing their home and father losing their job and being homeless overnight, and used soccer intentionally, but their team got them back up on their feet, and two kids that went off to college and have created amazing careers for themselves, but mostly in social justice and enterprise. And so I was fortunate to come on after the U.S. soccer election when I knew that this growing the game at the ground level and opening up our sport to more kids was something that I was passionate about and interested in. So I came on as their national chair, and it was in those moments where I really learned about the true problem in a vast landscape of the forgotten. And these are kids not experiencing the health and wellness benefits of the greatest sport on the planet. And in that search, I just at a molecular level was unwavering in my pursuit to debunk this idea that it's unaffordable to play one of the easiest and most blue-collar and accessible sports on the planet. But in that search, and working with the Aspen Institute of Sports and truly understanding the soccer problem, that I guess I would say ostensibly was out to solve, I realized there was a massive sports problem of kids dropping out of sports in mass numbers. And the trend for me kind of shifted my focus of course, I'm out to win World Cups on the men's side. Of course, I want our women to keep winning national or World Cups. Of course, I want a professional league and an open system full of incredible teams with the sporting meritocracy of being able to climb the top. Of course, I want all these amazing things that soccer nations have, but I was terrified to find out simply the incredible life benefit of being involved in team sports has become a luxury and a luxury of a few and not a right of all. And that's when I started the Over-Under initiative, because I knew access to youth sports was the bigger problem that's becoming a health crisis, with childhood obesity tripling since the 70s. And so, no one needs to have the incredible social justice and health and wellness power of sport proven to them. We all understand. We've all lived that life in a certain way. So I was out to figure out, what is this problem keeping kids out of soccer and other sports, and what can I do about it? And Over-Under initiative was the answer.
And you guys, the listeners can hear that Kyle's got the airport noise in the background. He's always on the move, and we're really thankful he's carved out his time to chat with us a bit. Kyle, I wanted to learn a little more about the big news you guys had with Over-Under signing a deal out in San Francisco this week.
It was just a really exciting announcement that I think is demonstrative of what's possible in such a short time period when Sweat Equity, a collective group of people with profile and pulpits they can speak from, and a little bit of capital can do behind an innovative access solution. And so when I was out to solve this soccer problem, and kind of to give you an idea why San Francisco was one of the first major cities to get on board, is I grew up playing soccer on hardscape. I grew up playing in gyms with Caribbeans in Mount Vernon when Edson Buttle and his dad would drag me along there, and Hispanic adults in Bridgeport and Norwalk. And for me, I was a young kid playing with older, bigger, and more experienced people, but in a very diverse and incredibly competitive, but fun and enjoyable and inclusive, if free, if not a few dollars to get on hardscape. So I grew up playing that way. And when I recognized the kind of country club of soccer that exists, where cost is getting absolutely egregious, and many, even the haves, even if they can't afford it, are failing out in terms of not enjoying the kind of sterile environments that they're forced towards. I went through Manhattan and rode around on a city bike and saw just a endless horizon of basketball courts. And so we have the largest inventory of hardscape sports facilities out there in terms of our handball courts, tennis courts, basketball courts. And when I realized there were 1,800 of them in New York City, I went and tracked them and found that a large percentage of them are completely vacant during peak activity hours. And so I tracked that for 3 months with an Excel spreadsheet that I put together, and had 10 people riding around on bikes looking at certain hours. And once the data was there and I saw that these facilities were a remarkable unused asset, even for the sport they're intended for, that's when I went back to when I traveled around the world playing soccer, and in South America and Europe, there was a soccer goal under every basketball hoop. And in those countries, I think you'd say they put a basketball hoop over their soccer goal, but same idea of I just cannot understand, as advanced as we are as a nation, everything out there has multi-purpose except for these basketball courts that are a single-purpose asset that I just don't think we're utilizing well. And so I went to Adam Silver at the NBA and met with he and his entire team. I gave them the same kind of pitch I'm giving you guys. I also added the symbiosis between basketball and soccer. And fortunately for me, Jordan Brand had done the PSG deal a couple days earlier. So, there's this inertia that brings these two incredible globally blue-collar games together that end up being remarkable potential fulfillment and empowerment tools. And I just kind of pleaded with Adam to say, we need you to say a basketball court should be more than just a basketball court. And he and his team agreed, and we began an informal pursuit of trying to figure out how we accomplish this. And essentially Adam said, come back with a plan. And I went away for 8 months and searched for a goal system that Parks and Rec would allow to scale publicly, and couldn't find anything that would assuage their liability concerns. So at 3 a.m. in my kitchen, terrified my wife by tearing apart all these boxes and building a model that today is in the ground in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and another version of it's going in the ground in San Francisco. And Phil Ginsberg, who's the head of Parks and Rec in San Francisco, I gave him the same plea I gave to Adam. I just said, listen, I'm really worried about the fact that these kids are locked out of sport. And I spoke from the heart, saying, as someone who recently realized I suffer from depression and have for a while, well, sport has saved my life and given me all these incredible tools to use to live a very fulfilling life and lean on teammates and set goals for myself, and just call on all the muscle memory and all the hard wiring that sports gave me. And I said, these kids aren't being given this, and many of them are at risk in swimming upstream already. And we walked around the city and we identified a couple locations, and we've worked with them with Street Soccer USA. So, he saw it right away, and now we have Detroit signed up. We've got other major cities that we're getting ready to announce soon that we're excited about. And so this was kind of my call to action moment that I tried to give to U.S. Soccer in my progress plan. And when they decided not to take it forward, I felt a responsibility to say there's nothing stopping us from mitigating the poor architecture and sometimes shirking of member services responsibility of our federation to open this game up to as many possible kids and big kids like me that still want to play.
And Kyle, I think this is such an amazing idea. Just personally, the first time I went to Europe, the first two thoughts that I had was, wow, like you said, the fencing that goes around their basketball courts, immediately there's no pole for the hoop. The hoop is attached to the fencing, and the fencing creates its own goal by having an indent in it. And so right away, there's that opportunity for those kids to play. And the second thing I think of is every soccer star around the world that you hear of, it doesn't start with they were in the academy. It starts with they were playing in the streets. They were playing in the alleyways. This is where they really learned their crafts before they kind of went into the establishment and were able to refine their game and make it to the professional level. So my question for you is, what are the next steps? What are maybe some of the changes or tweaks you're looking to make to your model? And then what is kind of the plan to try and get this out there in as many communities as you possibly can?
Yeah, thanks. For me, there's lots of exciting tweaks going on behind the scenes, because the reason I came up with this goal system was actually a Parks and Rec person who was being, I won't use bad language, but being a little rude, in that he said, Kyle, I love your passion. Listen, I don't even mind you playing soccer on a basketball court, but he said the goals have to disappear when they're gone, when you're gone. And so, that kind of gave me the idea of, my Murphy bed disappeared in the wall when I was living in a tiny little apartment in New York City. Attic staircase goes away when you're not using it, all these things. And so our next model that we're coming out with, I had a few dreams that these engineers told me weren't possible. One, as I said, the line's already there. The court is already drawn, and it's perfect to play soccer. So the goal needs to live on the end line. And there were all these reasons that you couldn't do that, and they wanted to make it caddy corner or behind the end line. And then the next one was, I want a young kid. I want a kid, or like I was when I was 12, that couldn't lift 20 pounds. I want them to be able to put this thing up by themselves. And if one kid wants to play, they can. And so the next model we're coming out with, I'm going to be slightly coy, is something that has basically a cheaper, sleeker, and just as durable and scalable structure and engineering mechanics to it, but it's almost automated. So it's a really exciting thing that in order to get this across, the country, these different markets, it's centers of influence. It's council members, it's mayors, it's Parks and Rec officials that hold the keys to this vast landscape that we can revive. And there are groups like U.S. Soccer Foundation doing great things to do futsal courts. There's Soccer Station down in Atlanta doing these amazing MARTA courts that are under trains and in different spaces. So there's all different ways to do it, but we are very specific in that we are a retrofit solution. And so, instead of going and doing these big new builds, I was able to just engineer a way to keep cost a fraction of any of these other capital projects to install a retrofitting solution under the hoop. So, it's really, and you guys are starting with this pod, it's really just about telling the story and allowing everyone else to be that network that goes out and educates local officials and pushes them to do things like this. Because for me, the yes is the hard thing. The funding, we're after and we're getting it. It's the yeses to scale this publicly. And I could go the private route of schools and all these things, but it's just, the impact in public is exponentially greater when it's a truly free and always accessible solution. So, the other thing that's very specific to us is we are a unique country in that we are multi-sport, and we always will be. And listen, do I want to see us win a World Cup on the men's side in my lifetime? Absolutely. Do I think that this unlocking the game in the city solution gets us closer? I honestly think nothing gets us closer. But one of the big things that's causing so many problems in sport and soccer as well in our country is the hyper specialization at too young an age. Asking a 9-year-old to pick a sport and get a trainer and fly around to these camps and tournaments. Some 9-year-olds like me are crazy and would love to do that. But I played competitive basketball all through high school, and still, to sound obnoxious, was the Gatorade Soccer Player of the Year in the country. Steve Nash didn't start playing basketball till he was 13. We have to stop forcing these kids into sport, because even the haves, even the ones that somehow either can afford it or find a way through, these kids are just burning out. And Mia Hamm said it to me during the election in the progress plan meeting that we had over 2 days at a summit I had in New York, where we built that basically system for changing the game and also a way to hold us accountable if I got in office. Mia just literally put chills through everyone when she was on the phone and there was about 20 people in the room, and she said, listen, Kyle, how many tiers there should be? Should we have promotion relegation? Should there be a development academy on the women's side? All this stuff is important, but she said the thing that's most important, that scares me, is kids just aren't having fun anymore. And it's an absolute epidemic. And she's totally right. We're coaching the spontaneity and joy out of the game. And this isn't an anti-coaching conversation. Coaching is essential. I've had some of the best coaches that still are part of my life. But spontaneous play is an absolutely essential part to the health and wellness of an individual, but also the development of a player.
Kyle, we talked about this a little bit, you and I individually, since the election. I think you had a lot of interesting personal lessons, and I know you tried to focus on sort of showing and not telling and being the change rather than sort of talking too much. All that being said, our listeners have experienced, whether it's high school versus DA or the structure of the youth national teams. I think there's a growing sense of frustration that's even bigger now than it was at the time of the election with the sort of the culture of the federation, the way that the federation is operated, that top-down mentality. I'm wondering what your observations have been with a little bit of perspective now and some time and some application in these other projects.
Yeah, it's funny. I got asked to do interviews after after some of the recent U.S. performances that were obviously really disappointing. The Canada game being one of the bigger ones. And so my answer to a lot of that was I just am focused on something else now. And so do I, in the aftermath of the election, think we've moved in the right direction? No, and that's not necessarily a criticism of Carlos. I just think there are systemic issues within U.S. soccer that will take cycles to fix, but most importantly, someone that is absolutely making it their priority to rid the federation of this culture of patronage and this opacity that makes it an organization hard to understand and truly appreciate the architecture. For instance, the search for the next CEO. I mean, that's the biggest hire in the history of U.S. soccer, the highest paid soccer official within an NGO, and we have no idea the process and how it's going. So, I mean, I'm not going to lie and say that those things don't frustrate me and that I don't try to lend what I can behind the scenes to help mitigate some of these issues, but the landscape outside of U.S. soccer, I mean, let's say for a second that the creative accounting of 4 or 5 million participants in the game, with double registration, all these other things that make that hard to measure. There's 80 million kids between the ages of 2 and 18. So it's just, the landscape is so much larger than even if the federation was run properly, than they can handle. So I'm done kind of yelling and getting upset and getting frustrated. And the election was shocking in many ways and incredibly inspiring in many ways. I feel optimistic that solutions are there outside, and eventually with enough pressure and scrutiny on decisions that are being made by our federation that are harming the landscape and forcing us to work much harder outside the gates, like eventually the pendulum's got to swing in the right direction.
I love the call to action, that positive mindset, because some of us get frustrated with pointing out the problems, as you mentioned. So in that spirit, what do you urge fans to do and players and parents and families to do? How can they get involved with Over Under? How can they show interest in taking part in converting their multi-use spaces? What are some things that you recommend?
Yeah, thanks so much. So overunderinitiative.com is where you can go to donate. Like I said, in order to scale this, it's very important that we go to Parks and Rec and other groups that are seeing their budgets cut drastically and not ask for money, but just ask for the right to go into their space and take it and turn it from that ping pong table that you flipped it and was a pool table, or you flipped it and it was an air hockey table. Do the same thing with a full-size basketball court. So, go there and learn more about it, but also tell the story to local officials. The people who can really move the needle here are obviously directors of Parks and Rec, the other thing that is important is to make sure that for growing the game, like this infrastructure solution helps, and to educate people on it, to send the link around, to talk to officials, but also it's the program side. When we lower the cost, increase the access, it's going to intrigue and excite kids that are going to play, that are going to need programs to help them along the way. So America Scores and Street Soccer USA and all these other groups, a lot of them are looking for volunteers, and a lot of them are looking for people to help out. So, sometimes the NGO space can get competitive, and it's a shame because all these groups are needed. But, I'm all for success is about partnership. And so, U.S. Soccer Foundation and America Scores and Street Soccer USA, we're going to unlock spaces, and that's what we are. We are not programming. So it's helping us get to these spaces and get to the officials and have the funds to do so, and then making sure that we help these programs keep kids as excited and as encouraged as they possibly can.
Oh, Kyle, awesome. Thank you so much. We could ask you so many more questions, but it sounds like you need to get on the plane. Thank you, so much, not only for joining us, but also for the work that you are doing and for actually standing up and looking to find solutions in a Twitter world where everybody just wants to yell and cry about the problem, but not actually do anything about it. So thank you once again, and we really wish you a safe flight.
Oh, thanks so much, you guys. Thanks for letting me tell the story.
One more break, and when we return, producer Bridget Baker will get us up to date with SoccerWire's college commitment tracker, and SoccerWire founder Chris Hummer joins us for a little segment we like to call Heard on the Wire. SoccerWire is the place for prospective recruits to list themselves and promote their profile to thousands of daily readers, including college coaches, scouts, and more. All recruits can list themselves for life for a small one-time fee. Already committed? Congratulations! All commitments can be reported for free and are included in our nationwide soccer recruiting and tournament wire to over 65,000 people each Thursday. Visit SoccerWire.com to create your player profile today. Welcome back to the weekly SoccerWire podcast. I'm joined now by producer and editor extraordinaire Bridget Baker, who is here to tell us about the most up-to-date college commitments.
Thanks, Mark. Always nice to get a compliment from the guys who make me have to be the editor extraordinaire. Starting off with the commitments for this week, just want to say congratulations to everybody. And going ahead and starting with the class of 2020, we have goalkeeper Amelia Hameroli out of the Houston Dash Youth Soccer Academy going to Colorado State. Sydney Schartz, defender for LAFC Slammers, is going to the University of Oklahoma. And moving on to the class of 2021, Gabrielle Sangilo, a midfielder for Phoenix Rising FC, is headed off to North Dakota State. Defender Tyra Ochoa from San Diego Surf is going to Wake Forest. Midfielder Charlotte McClure of Concord Fire will be going to University of Virginia. Addie Cooper, midfielder from North Carolina FC Youth, will be heading to Appalachian State, while Angelina Gallo from Sockers FC will be going to the University of Illinois. Defender for LAFC Slammers, Ryan Brown, is going to Princeton. Anna Pierce, a goalkeeper for Michigan Hawks, will be going to Butler. Forward Liliana Gemma from PDA is going to the U.S. Naval Academy, and defender for the St. James FC Virginia, Madeline Walker, will be going to William and Mary.
Thank you, Bridget, and congratulations to everyone who has taken the next step in their soccer journeys. Finally, let's touch base with SoccerWire founder Chris Hummer on things he's heard on the wire this week. Chris, what made your ears perk up?
Hey, Mark, how are you doing? So a couple of things this week. I have 4, actually. And it's always funny how we get to these because sometimes I don't even think about it, and then I start thinking about it, and I come up with too many. But we're going to limit it to 4 today. This has been out for a little while. It actually made national news. There's a high school girls team in Vermont who has a lot of fans who were of the U.S. women's national team, and they're getting close to the playoffs, or they're in the playoffs, and apparently they all had underneath their jerseys equality T-shirts, which is, speaking to the push for equal pay that the U.S. women's national team and Megan Rapinoe have been behind a lot. So in like the third minute of the game, they scored a goal, and apparently, and I heard this story on NPR when they covered this exact story in NPR, the girl who scored the goal was just going to do that thing where you sort of reveal the message underneath your shirt, and she just took her shirt the whole way off, her jersey, not the whole shirt, and all the other girls did too. So and it just said equality underneath it, and they got carded just like you're supposed to in a soccer game. So they got penalized for that, and that of course became the headline. But I think everybody thinks, well, that's a small price to pay for the exposure that they got, and I hope it helps that cause for sure.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, I hope that the outrage that they got carded was quickly cleaned up by people saying, well, no matter what you're wearing underneath, you take your shirt off after scoring a goal, you get carded. But still, credit to these women, and also a shout out to their classmates and some of the members of the boys soccer team as well who wore those shirts in solidarity with them.
Yeah, and I would imagine it's probably become a trend. There's probably been high schools elsewhere. Whenever something becomes big social media news and big news like that, you get the copycat effect. So the whole point of doing something like that is to raise awareness, and they've done that. So that's pretty fantastic. Next, this is no particular order, of course, but as we're recording this, we're seeing news come across the Twitter sphere that Tab Ramos, the former U.S. men's national team star, he's been the youth technical director for U.S. Soccer since 2013. He's coached several youth national teams, and he's making a huge name for himself in coaching. But we're hearing rumors that he's going to be the next Houston Dynamo MLS head coach, which is certainly, you could almost say, probably not about time, because I would be willing to bet that he has had many MLS coaching opportunities. Perhaps he was holding out for the U.S. men's national team job. It was heavily rumored that he was a top candidate to have been the fill-in coach after Bruce Arena resigned following the World Cup qualifying failure. So, if this is true, which it usually is when you get this much buzz about it, it'll be really good to see him coaching.
And I think to take the youth angle on this one, Chris, I mean, the Houston Dynamo's academy has been pretty much absent. They have teams and everything, but they're among the worst out of the academies in Major League Soccer. So to have a coach who has so much experience in the youth game, to have the success that he's had with the U20 national side, be interesting to see not only what he brings to the first team, but if he's able to pick up this academy and bring them to where they should be.
Absolutely. I mean, he's been a part of a very successful youth club in the New Jersey area as well. Everything he's touched, almost from a coaching perspective, has been a success. Sometimes you get into a big tournament and you get knocked out, but in general, and if you, I don't know how old you are, but for those of you listening, this is one of the first stars I was very familiar with when I started watching U.S. men's national team, and even back then, he was always a highly technical player. He was able to translate that into his teaching and his player development. So I would not be surprised if he's the next U.S. men's national coach if he does well in Houston. I ranted a little bit last week about referee stuff, and I've been doing a lot more research on it, and certainly because I talked about it, some feedback came in. This is getting more referees into the system is key for us to have better refereeing at all levels of the game. And I reported last week there's a lot of shortages of referees at youth games right now. Getting some more information on that. Some of the reasons are it's sounding like there's major change in the whole referee world. U.S. Soccer has recently changed the grading system from referees, where they used to have a grade 8, 7, 6, 5. The lower the number, the higher up you were, and gone with a new system. They have a new national database that's managing referee certifications, and one of the main platforms that's used for referee assignment had gotten acquired and is now rumored to be going to become unsupported because the company that acquired it is throwing their hat in to do another platform. It's just it feels like a mess when you're out there on Saturdays and you only have one referee show up. So one very specific piece that I've heard on the wire was, as an example, in the Northern Virginia area, in the last year since these new changes have come, there's only been 10% the number of new referees that have come into the system. So what that means is referees that have taken classes, become certified newly, and entered the pool of available referees, there's only been 10% of the normal new referee influx over the past year just in the Northern Virginia area, which is a huge soccer area. So if that's anything like what it's in the rest of the country, that means it's hard enough to get enough referees as it is. But clearly it must be because of the changes or the lack of classes or something else that's available for the referees, it's become very difficult. So that's a concern.
Yeah, it's absolutely a concern. I guess my question is, what steps need to be made so that more referees can get through the system?
It sounds like simplifying the how-to process on becoming a referee, for sure.
It's so funny how these messy problems always seem to have sort of simple answers, but it's always a lot harder than it appears on the surface. Finally, really cool story that you have for us.
This might be seen as a little bit of a plug for a new advertiser in SoccerWire, but it just have to mention it. It's not every day you get a Premier League champion and current player submitting an advertising form to SoccerWire, but that actually happened this week. Leicester City left back and champion Christian Fuchs submitted a bunch of ads for us this week to support his club in a club he's involved with in the New York area. And if you're a Leicester City fan, you'll get the connection. It's called Fox Soccer Academy. They're having tryouts this October and again in March, and he just became an advertiser. And our producer here has been communicating with him online, and it's just a little surreal. So welcome, Christian.
Oh, really cool to have him on board, and best of luck to you, Christian, and the rest of your Premier League season. For coverage of everything youth soccer, be sure to check SoccerWire.com, your premier location for the best coverage of the youth game. If there's something we missed or a topic you would like discussed, hit us up on Twitter @TheSoccerWire or hop over to SoccerWire.com and click on the Contact Us link on the bottom of any page. Every Thursday, we put out our National Soccer Recruiting and Tournament Wire, and for those of you in the Mid-Atlantic or Tri-State regions, we send twice weekly local news roundups. Just click on the newsletter link on SoccerWire.com to get the best of SoccerWire.com in your inbox. That will do it for this edition of the SoccerWire podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. For Quinn Castile, Charles Boehm, Chris Hummer, and our producer, Bridget Baker, I'm Mark Serber saying thank you for joining us on the SoccerWire podcast.